How's that? Everybody can hear me? The power of sound. Um, how many people here have seen me talk before? Anybody? Raise your hands high. Handful. Lectures, stuff like that. So, it's been a while now. Sort of like when you have more years behind you in terms of your spiritual practice and study than what you did on the beginning of your journey. So, I have probably around when I was 16 years old, I had a out-of-body experience. I like to say that it was a non-drug induced out-of-body experience because, a lot of people just make assumptions. He has long hair, so he probably does drugs. Well, I may have smoked marijuana one time, but I did not inhale. I, I promise. Eventually. So, but it did actually set me up to go on a quest to understand what had happened. And so I lived in Howard City, Michigan at the time. It was my hometown, still is where I call home. And I went to the library and started my search there. And they had a small, like a occult and alien section, right? There were like maybe 5 or 6 books. This UFOs, strange paranormal books. Remember all those? Yeah, so they had a handful of those, handful of theosophical books, handful of Edgar Casey books. It was really a great fodder to start this journey. I mean, Edgar Casey is still one of my favorite, I don't know what you call them, healers, teachers in this work. But from that point forward, uh, I'd set out with the intention of developing clairvoyance, with the intention of using those to help people. And so from basically about 1998 through 2007, I kept working at my meditation practice. Again, with the express intention of developing clairvoyance, with the intention of developing cities to help other people. City spelled SIDDHIS, which is basically powers and abilities that are extensions of consciousness, like telekinesis. We've seen those, like what the spiritual masters tend to have. And so in 2007, my intuition opened, what we call the intuition, the ability to know things about people who'd come to see me. And I was teaching meditation at the time as a form of service to others. And so I would have, I think everybody here who's actually taught something publicly knows that you're kind of lucky sometimes if 1 or 2 people show up, right? So for the first months, like maybe the first year and a half, I'd have like maybe 1 person come at a time, 2 people come at a time. And I would still sit with them, meditate with them. And ultimately, I felt compelled to share information about what I received during my meditation about them. And this is really interesting because sometimes I would know things like the person who I was sitting with had cancer previously and was really concerned that she was going to get it again. And I asked her about it, and she said, yeah, I did have cancer. I'm really concerned about a recurrence of cancer. And so we talked about it. Another guy, I saw that he had significant heart issues. And he says, yeah, I'm medicated for it. And these are not people who came up to me and shared their stories. They're people who came to me, sat with me, and I understood their stories. Eventually, word spread, and I started to get invited to people's households to share. And at this time, I began to actually see physical aspects of the human auric field. Began to see chakras, thought forms, things of this nature. And so as I helped people, they would tell other people and they would call me. And then sometimes they would invite me into their home to talk with their friends. And so I started delivering lectures this way. And this went on for a couple years. I think I was delivering lectures here at the time, around 2011, 2012, when I met David. Archetypal patterns. Because as I began to see more and more of the human energy field, it didn't just happen at one time. People sometimes remark, wow, you're really clear, you're really fast at seeing things. But that was not always the case. It was quite a journey to get from where I started to where I am now, where I can look pretty clearly through a person's energy field to see things that are impacting them at many levels. So I was giving lectures here. I met David. David has been one of my best friends since that point in time. A great help, a great support, a wonderful encourager. like, I wish that I had him when I was in my childhood, it's one of those experiences. Interfaith, I met my son's mom here, which also, is really amazing when you think about it. And, just being in this space and making connections here and delivering messages and workshops and, books later, David's books that he calls me up one day after he meets me and he says, "Hey, Cristo, I've been listening to you teach now for how long? Maybe a year and a half, 2 years, less than that, 6 months." And he says, "I really would love to write a book about your teachings." And I said, I don't know. I mean, I hardly knew him, right? 6 months is like saying, "Do you want to get married?" Even after like 5 years, people ask, "You don't want to get married now?" So he says, I'll let you write down what you've taught, and if you're okay with that, I'll do it." I'm like, I don't know. So thought about it for a while. He sent me a manuscript later, and I'm like, wow, this guy is good. And it kind of, you have one of those moments where you realize that the people that you're talking to are listening, and they're recording with their eyes and their ears everything you say. And this was a great example because he had written down so clearly the things that I had taught in my classes and workshops that I wondered if he had secretly carried a recorder in his pocket and just would transcribe the tapes when he got home. but it's these sorts of things that have happened along this journey, in this space, around this space, that really has made Interfaith a very special place to me. And it's become like that time of my life in 2011 and 12 when I was teaching here regularly, and then later David and I did things together here. It really became, I think, a proving ground for our work in the world. And I think it's wonderful. David and I are both still considered, I think, national speakers for the Theosophical Society, which is, kind of like a dream come true for me, as I always wanted to do work on their behalf since I was 15 or 16. And then one day somebody in one of my lectures in Florida says, "Hey, I know the people at the Theosophical Society. I think that you'd be a great national speaker. You're funny." A lot of them aren't. That's very true, actually. So it is true. Yeah, it's terribly true. So, I think without this experience here, we would have never had that experience there. And, I do feel deeply called to teach. It's one of those things that really is deeply embedded in my soul. And I've been out of circuit for a little while because with COVID, it really impacted my practice. I think anybody else here have that experience? Like I just couldn't really hold on any longer, and I had to jump ship. So now in my day job, I'm a recruiter. I recruit people for, but it's great in many ways because the skills are transferable in many ways, and I still get to help people. I mean, what's really amazing is that when you start talking about the salaries of the folks that get hired, it's like 180,000 annually, 190. I mean, I don't know, that seems like a lot of money to me. So we're making big changes in people's lives. But, as you can see, well, I don't know, none of you have received these yet, but this is kind of an outline of my talk today. And if you'd like a copy, you can either get it now or you can get it after. Anybody? What's your preference, now or later? Later? Okay, that'll work. So I've been out of the talking circuit for a while. At the height, I was giving talks at Lilydale in Florida and around at different places, and it was just incredible to meet so many people and to be able to really give so many, for lack of a better word, readings. And each person that I met with really was an opportunity to look at the journey of the soul. And I feel incredibly privileged that I was able to have that experience. When like you, right? You meet with people, you talk with them. You know what it's like to look and like have the experience of walking with somebody in their journey. Is that true? And I think it's such a place of privilege. And I've had that privilege of standing, I don't know, I would say thousands of people maybe, It's hard to keep track when you're at bat swinging at balls, you know? It's just, no, how many have you hit? Well, I don't know. How many have you missed? I don't know. But, you know, I've stand there and, you know, been swinging a lot. And I've had that great privilege of being able to develop these abilities to a much finer degree because of all the people that I've worked with over the last 15 years. Without them, I could not do any of this. This talk is actually a talk that I believe that I delivered here in space around 2011. Does that seem right to you, David? Birth vision? Yeah, you know, 15 years is a lot of water under the bridge, right? Kind of like not like saying what we did last week, which still may be a hurdle sometimes for me. I'm like, you know, I don't remember. But it's true. It's like, wow. But I believe that I delivered this lecture here, and this is something that is really important to me still, because that vision that I received when I was around 15 or 16, it's still beating a drum in my consciousness that I continue to hear, basically whether I'm sleeping or awake, driving or walking. Does anybody else know what that feels like? Right? The thing that you saw is so present in your consciousness that there's not a time of day or night that really you let it go. So I still wrestle with this idea of my path of service. You know, I know that we have to eat, we have to have shelter, right? But we also have to have our spiritual calling. We have to do it. Like I think about David, right? You know, and I was here the other day. We've been coming regularly because we really enjoy this space. And I think I read the other day or heard the other day that you had basically created Interfaith in 1980? 98. 98. So I'm thinking, has it been an easy ride? Right. No. So I was sitting there in the midst of service the other day, having heard that, and I was just wondering, what would possess this man for the last, let's see, 1980, 2000, 26 years, right? Is that correct? So what on earth would possess David Bell to hold this thing together for the last 26 years of his life when it hasn't been easy, right? You said it has been easy. Some easy, some difficult. Just like life. But if I may ask, I'm sure that you think about this too. What is it that keeps you doing it? Okay. Did you have a vision of teaching? Was it, how did that come to you, if I may ask? Really? Just got up one day. So you were saying that you don't know why. You just that you need to do it. Okay. So, but there has to be an answer somewhere deep inside of them. We can dissect them. Look for the answer inside. But I think that the visions that we have are things that deeply motivate us, that keep pushing us, even when adversity or difficulty sets in, right? Even when it's tough. So I think that covers my background, right? Spiritual study practice is a means of leading up to the birth vision. Well, you know, what is the birth vision? And I think that we have to understand what it means to have a spiritual practice. Originally, I had looked at the word discipline. And, you know, I'm like, that's kind of a loaded word at this point, right? You're laughing. Is it a wonderful word? Yeah. But I think that, you know, from my experience, maybe because this is the people that I've worked with, that discipline has been something that has been used against us. You know, that it's not something that we take up on our own, but it's something that has been hurtful. So I'm like, well, what other words can we use? And I've studied a lot of Eastern religions over the last, I don't know, 30 years. And The words that came to me were the sadhu and the sadhana. Anybody familiar with those terms? Sadhu, sadhana. So a sadhu is essentially a person who practices sadhana. Sadhana are mantra, other forms of ritual, essentially to achieve spiritual enlightenment. Okay? So basically, it's our disciple discipline, sadhu, sadhana. And it's through the practice of spiritual discipline that eventually we wake up and we have a spiritual vision, what I call a birth vision, because it takes us out of the normal flow of everyday existence and it births us into the world of spirituality. I think it was Christ who said that God is spirit and must be worshipped in spirit. Are you familiar with that? So the idea is that when we are actually birthed into this, when we receive our birth vision, we actually are now birthed into this other reality, this other spiritual reality. And that's when we our life changes course significantly. I don't know how else to say it. You know, we're no longer the run-of-the-mill people, because like I'm gonna pick on David a lot, because I think that someone who's picked up a torch and ran with it for 26 years understands. How has this impacted your family? You know, like yeah, I'm gonna hand off the mic to you for a moment, okay? Is that okay?
Say what? Oh, all right. So, hi, Zoom.
You know, how has it impacted your life, your family, your day-to-day existence?
I'm going to tell a funny story, a wonderful story about my sweetie. When I told Judy, and we've been together for 61 years, which is a long time, that I was planning to go to seminary, she said, "So, what are you going to do with that?" And I said, "Well, I don't know." And she said, "Well, you can do anything you want except start a church." So the depth of her love for putting up with me is beyond imagination. So, and the other, you see, I come from half a lifetime of atheism. When I was 16, unlike having an out-of-body experience, I had an experience of revulsion. You know, I walked away from organized religion because I was convinced that I was being conned by a bunch of hypocrites. And then in my mid-40s, I had a couple of mystical experiences that said, "Oops, threw the baby out with the bathwater, got to find another way to be." And I discovered metaphysics and the real story. And I said, this is too important. This needs to be shared. So that's what drove me to do what I do and did. And I feel like I probably have made a difference in a few people's lives. So it puts a smile on my face.
I think the key point there was that he said that it was something that had to be shared, right? Did you hear him say that? And so that motivation of having had those experiences and have it become something that's so important that it needs to be shared no matter what, even though his wife originally vetoed it, right? You can do anything but. He just, you know, had you said anything else, he would have done that too. Yeah. You should have said, you know, you can do anything but open up an ice cream shop. So in the process of practice, we eventually sort of develop what I call the structures in the head, or the chakras. Everybody's heard about the chakras, but I think our understanding of them is really limited, especially having had the opportunity to look at them and study them directly for since around 2009, 10. So, but what happens through spiritual study and practice is that the crown chakra tends to open, the ear chakras are impacted, and the third eye sometimes will develop simultaneously. And what this does is it puts us in contact with the world of spirit, where we begin to know things and to see things and to hear things, which again, given the combination of all of those things, seeing, hearing, and knowing things, and to have a birth vision, oftentimes people think that we're beginning to lose it. Anybody in your family? Right? Who's laughing over there? So the people who are closest to us, they don't understand because they didn't have the experience that begins to rewrite your understanding of what the real destiny of humanity is, right? So you can't have conversations with people about it because, well, the short way of looking at it is they think that you're off your rocker, right? And I have worked with people whose birth visions are big. I mean, again, starting a church is a pretty big deal, especially one that operates for 26 years and counting. And could you imagine that phone call? Hey, Mom, Dad, I'm going to open up a church. Okay. It kind of reminds me of Jane Goodall, who I also think of somebody who had a significant birth vision. Again, imagine her calling up her mom and dad. Hey, Mom, hey, Dad. Yep, I just got done with my degree. And I've decided to live for the next 26 years in the jungle with the chimpanzees. Again, her family had to think that she was off her rocker. I have to believe that. But at the same time, what an incredible impact on the world over in terms of how we now, what I understood is that she wanted to do is become a voice for the voiceless creatures who needed representation. And so, but this is, again, just another example, and you'll have your very own stories and experiences of having your very own visions and maybe not showing up for family events because you're too busy meditating, you're too busy developing your practice, communing with God, going to church on Sunday, whatever it is that you have to do in order to answer the call of your spirit. And this is another problem, is that the scale that God creates on is expansive, right? God works in universes, solar systems, planets, and here we in our little human bodies, we have the capacity to what? We have to sleep, we have to eat. We can only lift, I think, between 40 and 100 pounds on average for the average human being, right? We can only walk maybe up to 20 miles comfortably in a day. Or that's probably uncomfortably. So, I've walked 10 miles in a day because I love walking. But even that afterward is a hike. I'm like, oh, my hips, So the physical body, us as human beings, our work, our ability to impact the world, I think individually is really limited. The other day, my friend David comes over for dinner, and he sees I have dumbbells on the floor. So David jumps down, he picks up my 30-pound dumbbell, and he's like, I can do this one. And he said, but I can't do that one over there. Now, this kind of fits in with what we're talking about here, right? That the human being is really limited in its capacity. So I decided to test it out a little further with my partner, my fiance, and I'm moving the rest of the weights from my basement because now we're living together, moving in, and so we're moving all my stuff over from my home to her house. Well, Matt helped me move up all the weights to my front porch, and she was helping me move them into the back of the car from there. So there was a lot of flat plates, a lot of dumbbells, and I decided that I was going to see how much she could lift. So when I would make a trip, I would grab the 2.5 and 5 pound flat weights. And I acted like they were heavy. So there was the big weight, the 50-pound dumbbell, and I wanted to see how she would handle it. So finally, we get there, and she reaches down, she grabs it, And then, because this was going to help, she starts grabbing it like this. And I'm like, dear, the neighbors are looking. It's a true story. Wish I had it on film. First time I saw it. So our capacity as human beings is really limited. But when that birth vision comes in, it's something extraordinary. Like we begin to know that it's not just us, but there's a part of us that sees it and understands it and knows that because we've seen it and because it's so important to us that we have some capacity to fulfill it. Does that make sense? Like when you see it and it's yours, there's almost like an immediate buy-in. Like, I know I can do this, even though it seems extraordinary. Like it seems impossible on your own to do it. And this is part of the birth vision because it means essentially that what I'm going to call the hull of our life. I was studying botany and trying to understand, our personality is kind of like the hull of a seed, right? That sometimes our personality has to crack open to allow these visions to emerge, right? Like when you think about it, some of the people that I think whose lives have actually cracked open and allowed their vision, their birth vision, to completely emerge: Gandhi, Jane Goodall, Martin Luther King Jr., Joan of Arc, Nelson Mandela, Tesla, Edison, and Ford. These are just my examples. And I think that when you think about how these people's lives essentially shattered, how much time? Okay. So how these people's lives essentially shattered, right, to allow for that vision to emerge from their lives or through their lives. This is the thing that I think in many ways that we are called to do. We're called to allow the hull of our life to split under these conditions, because the birth vision, it's not something that you can kind of throw into the background of your existence. David, how many hours has this thing taken up in your life? Quite a number. So would you say that you were able to integrate this into your life, or you took your life and integrated it into that vision? Yeah, let's get the wife's answer because she would know.
It's the second one. He integrated his life into his vision.
And again, if you look at these people, that's exactly what they did as well. We are, the short story is that we are called to service. The question is, how much have our lives acted as a container or as a vessel for that vision? I'm hoping that the meditation here that I would like to leave you with is really simple. Close your eyes for a moment. Take your wallets out first, put them on your laps, close your eyes. Time for collection. The question in this space is, how has my life opened to allow this vision to emerge through me? Or maybe to what degree has my life opened to allow this vision, my birth vision, to emerge through my life into the world? I don't know that we can expect perfection here. I don't even know that I myself am capable of delivering 100%. The other day, my manager at work asked me, she said, "How present are you at work?" I said, "Well, I'd say at least 80%. She wasn't happy with the answer, but I was being honest. And that's pretty good for a remote job, right? I mean, yeah, I'm like, I know what I'm supposed to do. I do it, right? But, to be 100% present and to 100% allow this vision emerge is something truly remarkable that I think few people are able to truly do, right? I'll leave you with this one last example, and then I'll call it. Gandhi, on a train from somewhere, he just got married. He had his law practice. Does everybody know that? Okay, so he's on the train and he's reading this book called Under This Last, and he has a spiritual epiphany. It's so vast that he decides to quit his practice. Now, his wife married a lawyer, right? I mean, this has to be a big letdown. I mean, like socioeconomically, it has to be a big letdown. At the same time, he absorbed his life into that vision, and it really governed what he did for the next, how many years of his life? 60? Before he was assassinated? You know, so it's, again, these are just examples, but I think they're incredible examples of what it means to really allow that birth vision to emerge through you. You know, thank you for listening to me talk. There is a copy of the notes. There may be some things that I missed, but Spirit encouraged me to print them and to hand them out. So hopefully they'll serve you on your journey. Thank you for allowing me to talk and